Hey there, Spencer Smith, host of Sell Fund with Spencer. We're now on part 2 of the 3-part sales masterclass. This time I'm sitting down with Chris Hamilton, and we talk about his journey going from a financial analyst to one of the top salespeople in all of our insurance industry. Love him. I hope you enjoy this episode. All right. Well, what's up, Chris? How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's really fun to actually get a chance to sit down with you and do this. We've been trying, I think, to do this for a couple months now, and scheduling just didn't intersect. We're both busy people, but I'm excited because that delay, I think, actually positioned this episode perfectly for what we're going to do today. So the folks that maybe, when I release all these, I'm doing a sales masterclass. And so the folks that have listened to part 1 would be Jennifer Bryson over at Mercer. Chris is going to be part 2 of the sales masterclass. And so anybody that wants to know, what are we going to talk about today? It's sales mastery, even though it'll be sales mastery within the insurance world. So Chris Hamilton, before I delay it further, partner, employee benefits practice leader at Hotchkiss Insurance. Why don't you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do, man?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. And the thought that you'd even consider me for a sales masterclass, I don't feel like I'm qualified for that, but I'm going to do my best to kind of share my experiences.
Well, so your industry disagrees with you because your name, when I posted this call to action, I need some great salespeople. Who do I need to talk to? 5 times Chris Hamilton's name came up separately. So your peers think very highly of you in sales.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's very kind of people to say that about me. So, I'm Chris Hamilton. I grew up in the Houston area, went to school in West Texas. I'm married. I have 4 kids, 1 golden doodle, and a handful of hobbies, one of which is carting kids around to baseball practice and soccer practice.
Yep.
So,
and I'm right there with you. I only have 2 kids, but I can feel your pain, man. But so, is the big family? Do you come from a big family? Did you always want to have 4 kids? Like, tell me about some of the motivations there.
No. I'm the youngest of 3 boys.
Okay.
And we're almost evenly spread apart, 3.5 years. So my oldest brother's 7 years older than me. And I think that kind of plays into some of the hobbies that I have because he used to drag me along with him periodically.
Beat up on you a little bit, probably, too.
No, actually, it was the other way around. My middle brother beat up on me, and the older brother was kind of the mentor and helped me beat up on the middle brother.
That's awesome. And how your kids? What's the makeup? Are we got boys, girls? Like what's
boys, girls?
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so you're doing baseball, you're doing soccer practice, but you were a football player, right? Like that was your kind of your sport, correct?
It was, yeah. And I really don't want my kids to play football. I've got 2 boys, and a lot of my friends make fun of me. They're like, wow, particularly the guys I played football with, how in the world would you not let your kids play football? That's what we did growing up. And I'm like, yeah, but I've had a hip replacement, a hip surgery, 2 knee reconstructions.
Well, hold on. So you had a hip replaced already, huh?
I had a hip replaced January of 20.
Okay. How old were you at the time when that was?
I was 30. I was 39.
Okay.
And I needed it for probably 5 years prior to that. I had an arthroscopic surgery prior to that. I played football. I was hard on my body from Pee Wee through college. I did jiu-jitsu for a number of years. And it just was, I worked out really hard and it was just rough on my body. And,
not bad. Dang.
And so ultimately I had it replaced. It's one of the best things I've ever done. I was just in really bad pain.
Well, so pain mitigation, but how is the strength and mobility post-surgery, right? Are you able to do the things that you want to do physically?
Oh, yeah. So I didn't have a traditional type hip replacement. There's the ball and rod, not to get too technical, but there's one that really only younger men can have, and it's becoming more common. And I have full natural mobility, full natural activity. I can run marathons. I can run whatever I want to do. Wow. My surgeon released me to go do.
Wow.
And they really can only do it for younger men under the age of 55 because the bone density is there.
That's wild, man. I didn't know that about you. That actually, I learned something while we're sitting down. You did tell me though, and I want to touch on this because I think it's interesting. You used to be 65, 75 pounds heavier when you were playing football, or even more?
Yeah, that's right, about 70 pounds heavier. So I played at about 275, 280.
What position were you?
So actually, I was a linebacker turned defensive tackle turned offensive lineman.
And this was in college, right?
This was in college.
Yeah, and you had a great post I was just sharing with you. I was on vacation about a month or so ago, and you had this really good post, a story about, perseverance, I think it was, where you were trying to tackle, or you were actually going up against like some huge stud offensive lineman, right? And you were having difficulty, and he slammed you in the dirt one time and kind of stood over you and taunted you a little bit, and you felt defeated, right? And then so tell me what happened after that. What was the kind of moral of that story?
Well, it was a moment that I was in a situation where literally the guy had broken my will in one play.
In one single play, just it was that bad. Okay.
And it never had that happen before. And I was an offensive lineman. He was a defensive tackle.
Okay, yeah.
He literally picked me up, took me into the backfield, sacked the quarterback with me, and then stood over and taunted me. And I was literally shocked. I was like, "Oh my gosh, can't believe that just actually happened. That's never happened to me before in a game." It was the conference championship, and it was in front of everybody. Everybody saw it, and it's the power of being shocked and wanting to quit. I literally wanted to get off the field on that moment, and it was my quarterback that came alongside of me, and he made a joke to me in that moment. It was just like, come on. And
probably some more choice words than that, right?
Yeah, but he said it with a smile on his face. And really, in that moment, to me, it was the power of having community, having team, and everybody, doesn't matter what your status is, you're high or you're low, everybody's going to run into a moment where they're going to face some very big adversity where you're going to want to quit.
Yeah.
And having somebody there alongside you to kind of pick you up, and it can only take an instant. He took 3 seconds, and he got me back into it. And ultimately, I had success.
How was the game? Did the game turn out?
We won.
You won.
We won. And the other guy and I, we didn't say a word to each other. The rest of the game, we competed, and we actually met up on the field at the end of the game and congratulated, or hey, good game, that sort of thing. And so it was one of those moments I had never really told anybody.
Really?
I told my wife. I was embarrassed. I mean, whoever wants to admit I wanted to quit.
Yeah.
But
you didn't. That's the whole point. You didn't quit. You wanted to. Everybody's been in that situation where you want to quit. A lot of people do. Yeah. Your moral of the story was you didn't quit, and then you had the positive outcome afterwards, right? But in that moment, you had a really human experience, which was, I want to quit. Oh my God, what just happened? And then you decided not to, and through the power of obviously encouragement with a teammate. Yeah. That's a universal lesson.
Well, and I think that actually, since we were talking about this, it translates into sales, because as salespeople, we face rejection, and anybody that's been in the industry long enough, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to face rejection, and you're going to face moments where you ask yourself, am I good enough to do this? Can I make it?
Yeah.
And being in an organization where you have somebody that can help come alongside you and give you encouragement is vital.
Well, and I want to talk a lot about, that's where obviously that we said that was the goal of today's podcast, is a continuation of this notion of, can we develop a kind of a sales master class, be a fly on the wall, right? I'm a young salesperson and I'm trying to get better, or I'm somebody that's peripherally related to sales, but I think I want to get into that industry, but I don't know where to start, or I don't know what to expect. So not even just specific to our insurance world, which obviously we'll cover that, but the universal traits, right? The things that translate industry to industry. What are the soft skills? What's the approach? What's the discipline required? I think a lot of that comes from sports, though, right? You're like me. I was a soccer player in college. I learned a lot of the things that make me a good salesperson today. Was taught through the lens of sports. Was that the same experience for you?
Yeah, when you think about what it is that we do, and I use sports analogies a lot, and I actually use analogies pretty much in every facet of my life, with my kids, with my coworkers, and I use analogies a lot when I work with clients. But I really like this sports analogy. Anybody that's in this industry, I tell my guys all the time, and gals, if you look at LeBron James, he makes money shooting baskets, and he's out on the court working to hone that jump shot. We don't get paid to do that. We get paid to speak and to communicate something that's very complex, and to convince somebody to our way of thinking and our philosophy. Yet, I can't tell you how many people that I speak to in our industry and in others that are in the sales profession that don't practice their jump shot, which is, what are you trying to communicate?
Yeah, I think it's important, man. I was having this conversation with Andy Neary. I think you probably know Andy well. And I told him, I shared with him, and I never really shared this with anybody else. It's like, man, sometimes I sit in my car when I'm driving and I practice my pitch. Like, I'm just talking to myself. And I'm sure somebody driving by is like, what is this guy doing, right? Well, who's he talking to? But to me, it's that artistry of communication. If I'm trying to position plan sight in an elevator pitch, what are the key words? What are the orders of words? If somebody asks me what we do, can I deliver that in 20 seconds? And can it be a very succinct but clear message about what we do? So I'm talking to myself. Sometimes I even practice like, what am I going to say to Chris Hamilton this morning? I'm kind of going, how do you do the intro? It's rather than me listen to somebody else talk, I would like to master the art of speaking. But this is listening as well. When somebody wants to speak for a living, they better be pretty damn good at speaking, right? And how do you do that? You practice, to your point. Exactly. Before we get into sales, I have one more thing. We've never actually covered these two subjects, but I know we both overlap here. We can do weightlifting. We can do heavy metal first. I know you're into both. Why don't we just do heavy metal first? What bands where we might intersect?
So I know Tool.
Yes. All right.
But my interest in Tool isn't necessarily in the music itself. The music is interesting.
Is it
right?
the lyrics or
No, it's the drummer.
The drummer. Oh, are you a drummer?
I've been a drummer since I was 6 years old.
Oh, okay.
And so,
all right.
For those that aren't familiar with drummers and
Yeah.
drumming, there's a lot of people that have shaped what's out in the the marketplace today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going all the way back into the 40s, and you think about like some of the original guys. You can't even say original, but really old school guys like Buddy Rich. But
Like jazz or blues?
big band.
Yeah.
And so anybody that wants to see incredible drumming from prior generation, look up Buddy Rich. I mean,
Okay.
it'll blow you away what that man can do. But the other thing is Danny Carey, he's like a different world. And people put, categories like Neil Peart, the drummer for Rush.
Yeah, for Rush, yeah.
Danny Carey's like different universe.
Well, that's what I agree. And it's always funny to me when you see like the top 100 drummers of all time, and Danny Carey ends up somewhere in like the 20s most often, because they are spanning all different types of music, and there's bias and influence based on eras and genres. But I'm like, if that guy's not in the top 5 or top 3 of all time drummers, I'd be astonished. Like actual technical execution.
Yeah.
Do you know Peter Travis in this industry? He's a recruiter out of the Overland, Kansas. Peter got me started. He got me into stop loss.
Okay.
But Peter and I have a shared mutual love for Tool, and he's a huge Danny Carey fan as well. I mean, I think of all the great musicians in that band, and each and every one of them are not aficionados, but what's the word I'm looking for? They're at the top level, right, of each one of their fields. I think Danny Carey's the best of them all, if I had to guess. So outside of Tool, though, and drumming, is there any other band?
I'm a huge. I love all types of music, and if I showed you my Spotify playlists, it ranges from country, Texas country, alternative, classic rock, hard rock, just everything.
Yeah.
And I would say the biggest influences musically for me is Dave Grohl.
Oh, really?
He's probably my favorite musician of all time because he's multi-talented. And anybody that wants to see what Dave Grohl's about, just go to YouTube and type in Dave Grohl play.
Okay.
And it'll blow your mind.
Really? Well, I'm going to have to do that on the way out of here.
Yeah. So if you think about when I was growing up and really getting into drumming, it was Nirvana and Metallica as far as the alternative and heavy metal bands, right? And so that's really kind of my style of drumming. I'm really into that power rock fusion style.
Yeah,
so anything that follows that. So Foo Fighters, I'm a huge Foo Fighter fans. And what a sad day when Taylor Hawkins passed away.
Yeah.
He was actually one of my favorite drummers. His style is very much congruent. I follow his style very, very much.
I was going to say, we probably now that I kind of get a feel for you, because every time somebody's like, oh, I'm a heavy metal fan, you're like, all right, but who? Or what? And then because it's one of those silly genres where there's so many different subgenres that people argue over, and who's a true metal fan. I mean, it's like, okay, but there's usually about a 70% overlap. So I think you and I are definitely eye to eye, and especially the era that we grew up in as well. What about weight training? Because I feel like we've always connected over like weightlifting. I've done a couple squat posts recently on LinkedIn that you commented on. So what's your approach to health and fitness now? Especially, I know you said you got the hip replacement, but it doesn't sound like that altered what you do at all, does it?
No, not really. I've self-selected the change based on my goals. So I don't necessarily want to train to be the strongest. I'm not trying to play football anymore or any of that. Really, for me, I want to live to be 100, and I want to mow my yard the day before I die if I can, and then just die in my sleep is my goal. So the focus of my training has changed, and I do a lot of yoga. My wife got me into yoga.
Okay.
I do some weights, but I don't do really heavy stuff. A lot of what my training is more functional based. I mean, believe it or not, bear crawling. I do a lot of bear crawling.
You told me one day, would you bear crawled for 5 minutes or something?
5 minutes straight, yeah, forward, backward, side to side, just moving my body around.
And that was the most sore you'd been in years or something like that?
I kind of build up to
Okay,
it. But I
okay.
try to, it's a good core workout. And also, if you think about it, as you age, people fall and they have a hard time getting up from the ground. And I know that makes me sound super old, but it does make you very strong. But I do a lot of body weight stuff. I built a gym a couple years before COVID happened.
Right
People
on.
made fun of me, but I wanted certain type of equipment. And I do a lot of rope climbing, rings, pull-ups. I use kettlebells. I have an air assault bike. I use it. But the biggest thing that I just absolutely love, I'm just like obsessed with this, is a torque sled. It's a sled on wheels that's magnetic resistance. And I
Yeah.
push and pull this thing. And
Yeah.
you want to talk about getting an unbelievable workout.
Well, Lifetime Fitness has a torque sled, and I didn't know that's what it was called, but it's exactly what you just described. Push and pull, but you switch a little knob, and it alters how fast or how hard the resistance is. I started getting into that with the knees over toes guy talking about
Yep.
sled pulling, and especially reverse sled pulling, going backwards to warm your knees up.
My neighbors think I'm crazy. They see me pulling it out in the street, and I've had people stop me like, "What in the
What are you
world
doing?"
What
Yeah.
are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so let's kind of explain them, just kind of.
Well, see, I think it's important though, and you mentioned the family life, right? And you're in it for longevity. I think part of what I do is longevity as well. Weight bearing, heavy weight bearing exercise for bone density and just longevity, grip strength, like Dr. Attia talks about. All those things are designed, right? When I hit 40 here in a month, it's designed that 40 hopefully is not my peak, or if it is the peak, there's a slower descent into death, not to be too morbid, but have a very high quality of life throughout however long that may be. And I think you and I are philosophically aligned there. This podcast is brought to you by True Captive Insurance, a premier medical stop-loss captive for employer groups ranging from 25 to 1,000 employees. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. That's why they take a white glove approach, making it easy for employer groups to transition into a program built specifically for them. Check them out at truecaptive.com.
Well, as somebody that's already past 40, I will tell you that you can actually improve.
I believe you.
I've had a hip replacement and knee surgeries, and I'm probably in some of the best shape I've been in, better than my 30s, I would say.
Yeah. Well, so let's do this, man. And we'll have a lunch and we'll talk about weight training after this. But for the interest of the folks that did tune in for sales, how'd you start, man? I know you were a late bloomer like me. So what were you doing before you got into sales?
So I studied finance and economics in college.
Okay.
And I got into banking, and I was a financial analyst. So I was the guy that basically underwrote credit
Okay.
and was getting down and dirty, understanding the financials of a company, how they made money, how their costs were structured, how to finance their businesses, whether it's working capital and acquisition, their equipment, whatever it was. And it was really cutting my teeth in numbers.
Okay.
And I lived in a cubicle, and it was not fun.
Yeah, I was right there with you, man. I lived in a cubicle for 6-7 years of my career. And not that I had a bad employer, not that my jobs were bad, but you basically get in there, you show up, you do tasks, you do projects, right? You crank away. There's not really any interpersonal relationships that get built outside of just your office buddies, right? You don't get a chance to go out and meet people and sell. But it was, I looked up one day and go, I don't know if I want to do this. I see the guys that are in the finance department that are 10, 15 years my senior, seem like happy guys. They have nice lives, but I didn't want to replicate what they did. I needed social stuff. Like I needed to socialize more, and I knew that the salespeople made a lot more money too, which was a big motivator. But was there a moment in time where you're like, I can't do finance anymore, and I got to get out and do something different, or did you know that was going to be sales is what you wanted to do?
I always thought that might be an option for me, but I wasn't sure quite how it would work. There was a day that I was in the cube, and one of the top bankers in the company called me and was asking about kind of where I was on this package that I was putting together for this client. And he said, hey, I'm getting ready to go meet with them. You want to go with me? You want me to swing by and pick you up, and you can come with me?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, yeah, I want to get out of the cubicle and go see what happens out in the field.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And this guy was really suave. I mean, not cheesy, but you could tell when he walked in, he commanded the room, and the client respected him, and he made really good money and drove a nice car, and he played golf. And I thought, wow, this is like a different. And I started asking him, like, what does your day look like?
Yeah.
And he was telling me about how he goes and meets with businesses and helps them do what they, and I was just kind of a part of that process to get it done. And I thought, wow, this might be something interesting. I'm interested in that. That sounds like fun. That's really what it was for me. It was fun and an opportunity to make more money.
Yeah, and I think both of those things are definitely true. I'm 10 years into this business. I don't know how many years you're in, but those things still ring true today, right? What you sell might differ, how you approach the business might differ, but if you're not having fun, and also if you're not hopefully making good money, which really is just the quantification of that you're doing a good job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they wouldn't pay you well if you didn't do a good job. Those things still ring true today, 10 years on. So what did you actually get started? Was it like, did you raise your hand and say, I want to go sell? Did you leave the bank? Like, how did you actually get your first sales job?
So inside of that organization, in the bank that I worked with, I got to know some of these other bankers pretty well, and I started working with them. I did a good job for them, and I had just over lunch meetings or what have you with them, just kind of trying to develop a relationship with them. I let them know, this is what I want to do. I'm interested in doing what you do. And ultimately, they're the ones that helped get me out of the analyst position and into what I would call a junior banking role.
Okay.
Working underneath them.
So what would you do? What does a sales process look like for a junior banker?
So pretty much it was, they kind of mentored me and, being able to go out and try to help me work my own deals. Kind of what we do in the insurance business. You get somebody that's new to the business, they go out and try to set appointments and go through discovery and figure out how we may be able to help them or not, and learn the prospecting side of the job. Sales is multi-stage, right?
Yes.
And when you're early in your sales career, you have to learn how to prospect initially.
Yep.
Where do I go? How do I identify? How do I get an appointment? And if you can't do those things, you won't be successful necessarily, or you're going to be less successful in this industry.
Or delayed, right? It might be a frustrating experience to get started. Did anybody show you the ropes for prospecting? I mean, did you have a guide, or did you watch other people do it and pick up things?
I watched other people. So I tagged along a lot with the more senior folks, and I saw what different styles they had and what worked, what didn't work. And I think one of the biggest things that is going to determine somebody's success is how genuine they are. And what works for one person may not work for somebody else. And so I always tell my people, don't try to be me, or don't try to be the guy next to you. Be yourself. And if you see something that works for somebody and you want to try it, great. But at the end of the day, if you're not genuine, you're not sitting in front of that client and they don't sense a genuineness about you, you're going to be a salesperson to them.
Agreed. Yeah, it's this weird thing, right? There's outside perception. I had this misconception as well that you had to be suave, I think was the word you used earlier. You had to be slick talking, right? And some of those things can be part of your character. But that's what I perceived all salesperson or people to be, and I just don't think that's true at all. The authenticity that you're talking about, the ability to be yourself in front of a room, still command a room, right? You still have authority, you still know what your subject matter is. But people like I'm talking to Chris, and I have a sense I know who Chris is. Chris seems like a good guy. He's got a good value system. Also, he knows what he's talking about. I want to do business with Chris. You have to have the substance underneath of who you are as a person. You have to be a good human being at the end of the day, because people can sniff out somebody that's either misleading them or tricking them into doing something, and you will get caught eventually if you do that.
Yeah. Well, who I am today in my career and then in my sales process is very different than who I was 10 years ago. And I think a lot of that has come with my experiences. A lot of it's come with where I am in my career and monetarily, or experience of working with types of clients. And that's one of the things I try to coach in people that I work with is you can't be all things to all people. And as soon as you figure out who you are and who your ideal client is, you're going to be more successful. I think too many times as salespeople, we feel like everybody's our prospect.
Yep.
I can work with everybody, and we chase things that we shouldn't. And there's a lot of work that should happen on the front end to figure out what it is that we're trying to accomplish and be willing to walk away from.
Yeah, be willing to pick and choose your customers almost. I mean, there's early on in your career, right? You're trying to take whatever you can get. And I totally get that. There was a point in my career when I was selling stop loss that I was just trying to get every case I could in the door. Then you start learning about loss ratios. Then you start learning about, oh, well, my managers are actually asking for more discretion than I should get because they wanted me to help me get my goal. And those things don't necessarily serve the business at large, but they want to help you get going, and obviously they want you to be successful. And then you almost get a little, they call it what, desperation breath or commission breath, whatever you want to call it, where you're just so desperate to get a sale that it's off-putting at the same time. So without any, did you have any moment in time where somebody gave you formal training and said, Chris, this is how to sell? Did anybody do that for you?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was actually pretty late in my banking career.
Really?
I'd already had success. It just touching hot stoves and like, whoa, that was hot. I messed up there. Don't do that again. And so it was just kind of learning on the job. And then I had a mentor that hired me to work at a different bank, and she was unbelievable. She transformed my life. And I'm a very unstructured person. I'm kind of...
Like from a process standpoint?
From a process standpoint. Okay. And she was very opposite, like type A, over-planned. When I would sit with her and we would go through a plan, she planned to plan to plan, and it made me tired. I wanted to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And one day she told me, she said, I see a lot of potential in you. You could be really good. But you're going to have to determine that you want to do that yourself. You're going to be okay no matter what you do, but if you want to be good, you need to sharpen here.
Okay.
And she gave me a lot of feedback that was periodically hard to hear, but I knew she had my best interest, and she was a team player, and she invested time in me and taught me a lot of the things that I needed, and even things that I still use to this day.
I was going to say, that's what a true mentor is they're able to actually tell you where you're deficient but guide you in a constructive way to overcome those deficiencies. It's not patting you on the back. It's not giving you all sorts of leeway and make mistake. It's no, you got potential, Chris, but here's what you're doing wrong, or here's how you could be better. And sometimes you need somebody that's willing to give you that hard lesson. But again, it comes from the heart. It comes from a good place, right? Yeah. So what is your style, man? I mean, some people are like relationship builder and taking people out. Some people are highly technical. Where do you land on the spectrum of those things?
That's an interesting question. I would like to think I'm a good relationship builder, and I think through the clients that I've worked with and still work with, some of them I have a really good and deep relationship with, and others, it's very surface level. I'm being quite honest. And I think anybody that's listening to this and is in sales, they know that there's certain people that you are, attract to and can bond with a little bit better. You have to be technical in our industry. It's very complex, at least to do the type of work that we're doing. It's very complex. You have to be technical. I probably would consider myself more the Swiss Army knife, where, or maybe just, I like analogies, but you think about back in the old days, the video games like Super Tecmo Bowl or whatever.
Yeah.
And you look at the player profile and they would show speed and agility, hands, endurance, and those sorts of things. And, some of the players are really good in certain areas and really low in others. I think if I was to pull up my skills, I probably don't peg super high on any one of them, but I feel like I'm well-rounded.
Mm-hmm. Well, so one thing I heard back when I was doing stand-up a long time ago that stuck with me is that if you see the comics that have made it, what they can do is be consistently good every time they step on stage. Anybody can be occasionally great, and you see some guys that never actually make it, some gals that never make it, kill it one set. The guys and gals that make it are consistently good every single night, over and over and over again. There's an expectation that their performance will meet a certain level. So if you're that guy or gal that is 80% on that 0 to 100 on everything, you're not 99 on anything, but you're also not 45 on something as well. I think there's something to be said for that because you have a diverse skill set. You're proficient in everything, even if you don't necessarily overly excel in any one thing. Neither do you have any gaps in your capability set as well. So you're that guy that's pretty good and knows when to pull certain levers, right? But one of the things you told me that I knew, I was hoping we catch it early on, but we weren't rolling yet, but I want to give you a chance to tell this. You're a storyteller, right? Some of your buddies in college and, you would be on the plane coming back from games or whatever. People loved your stories. So tell me about that part of you.
Yeah, so I was tagged as the storyteller very early on in college. There was a night, I'll never forget this, we were all out to dinner, a bunch of these football players, more senior guys that were kind of taking the younger guys under their wing, kind of getting them acquainted with the team and kind of integrated. And we were sitting at dinner, and towards the end of the dinner, I had just been telling stories, like, where are you from? I'm like, well, back in the day or back when, at home. And I'll never forget this guy. He was a senior at the time, and he gave me the nickname Hanover, and I hated it.
Okay.
I was like, oh my gosh.
What did it mean, though? What?
So he pegged me as a storyteller. And if you remember the old TV show Cheers.
Yes.
So Woody Harrelson, he would always tell these stories. And he's like, well, back in Hanover. And he would go off on this story. And he said, that's you.
That's you. That's funny.
And so.
Did that nickname stick, by the way?
That's the only way people knew me. And I hated it for about the first 18 months. I was like, don't call me that.
That's
don't
awesome.
And then finally it was like,
You
okay.
just lean into it, man.
Just own it. But it was every day. We'd go out to practice, and there's this lull time before practice starts of 10 or 15 minutes, and people would, hey, Hanover, get up here and tell a story. And so we had a big table that was under this oak tree. So I would just literally stand up on stage on this underneath this oak tree, and I would either tell jokes or stories. And I had about 12 stories that the guys loved, and they would have me tell these stories over and over and over again. I'm like, I've told this story like 47 times. You don't want to hear it again. Like, no. We're on a flight back from Wisconsin, and they'll tell the story again. And it's like, and a lot of times there's just some sort of weird twist in the story that gets everybody laughing, and they know it's coming, and they still laugh.
Well, and that's like any great art, right? You watch a movie, your favorite movie, you've watched it 20 times. Your favorite song, you probably listened to 200 times, right? You know it's coming, but it's almost the expectation of a punchline or the expectation of something that's great. The anticipation actually makes it better because you do know it's coming. I mean, we talked about Tool earlier, but there's songs I've listened to hundreds of times easily, and I still pick up something new, or I know this part's coming and I'm getting so excited about it, and then there's the payoff, because of that anticipation. So I'm sure those guys just are like eating it up because you had the art of storytelling. It wasn't necessarily just the substance of the story, but your ability to tell the story, right? So is that a skill that you believe translates, I would presume so, but into the sales world?
Absolutely. I think it does. If you think about what we do, it's very technical. It's highly complex. Even people within the industry don't always know how it works. And when you do, all this technical information, throw it out to somebody, they have no way to digest it. But what do we have the ability to digest is stories, particularly if you can make them relatable.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about crafting a story. One time there was this guy and he needed insurance. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you meet with a group, or with a client or prospective client, and you're starting to talk to them about how healthcare works, if you tell it as a story, that's a relatable story because most of us, either ourselves, a family member, or a friend, has experienced some adverse effects from healthcare or health insurance.
Sure.
But you'll get in front of a CFO, and this happens all the time, or even a business owner sometimes, and they say, I don't care about that. I care about the money. Okay, well, let's tell the story about how money works inside of health insurance.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to relate. If I start explaining vertical integration and PBM and spread pricing and wholesale costing and that sort of thing, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose people. But if you tell the story properly and use an analogy, that's been going on since the beginning of time. That's how people have communicated complex thoughts. You think about the Bible, right? Jesus, the ultimate storyteller, he taught through story.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. And we've been telling his stories for over 2,000 years.
Well, and Jordan Peterson, who I don't even think is a Christian himself, talks a lot about he studied the Bible backwards and forwards, and he talks about the ability through story, through parable, through allegory, to convey complex, abstract subjects in a way that resonates with a human being on a subconscious level. That, hey, if we just technically told them what happens and here's what to do and here's what not to do, it might go in one ear out the other. But if it hits you, that's really where it connects with a human being. This podcast is sponsored by PlanSight. PlanSight is a technology for employee benefits brokers to more efficiently manage their RFP process for any group size, all funding types, and over 20 benefit lines and point solutions. PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP technology on the market today. Let's modernize your RFP process together. Check us out at plansight.com.
The best stories that we can tell are ones that accomplish a few things. One, it has to disseminate understanding, information and understanding. When I tell a story to somebody, they have to have the light bulb moment. Yes. I get it.
Yes.
But the most effective stories also communicate emotion.
Yes.
And when you can do both of those, you are going to quickly figure out if this person, if that aligns with you or not. And this is the hard part for people in sales. If it doesn't align, don't be a chameleon and try to slide into where you think there's going to be alignment.
Okay.
I think that's a mistake that a lot of people in the sales profession make. I'm going to adapt to this person, and then whatever it is they need, I'm going to provide.
Yeah.
And you run into traps doing that. I figured that out the hard way.
Yeah, and you run into short-term clients, you run into losses. You know, if you're just going to be yourself, then you don't have to remember who to be, right? One of those things, it's a life lesson that we all get told, right? But it's true. You can't sell to everybody. You shouldn't want everybody as a client, and they're probably not going to want you as their partner as well because of that. So don't fake it, right? I mean, the whole idea of fake it till you make it, I get, but I don't agree with it either, because that just suggests that you're going to be somebody else or a character until you actually someday just absorb the role or assume the role, which I don't think ever actually happens.
Yeah.
So soft skills, what other, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I want to make sure I don't confuse this point.
Yeah.
Being a chameleon, right, that's not a good thing. Being adaptable to your client I think is important, and that is okay. Some of the clients, I mentioned that, we have deep relationships with some of them and others that we don't. Mm-hmm. It's important to sense that. If somebody doesn't want a deep relationship with me, they just want to move on with their life, that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I have clients that hire us to get a job done, and then we develop a relationship. And then I have other clients that they're at a point in their situation, they want a mercenary. They want to hire a gun to go do the job.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I've noticed about CEOs and CFOs and other executives is they're busy. They don't have a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And most of them, they're highly successful. They have friends already. They have hobbies. If they want to go on a trip, they're going to pay for it themselves. They don't want to go with a salesperson.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I saw that early on as well, and I never was a glad hander. I never was a guy that was like showing up with a bunch of cookies, and I felt like if that's the way you're going to win business, well, who's going to bring better cookies next time behind you and win it from you? I was like, I always wanted to be the person that could take, like you said, a complex subject and distill it down into the basics and be able to communicate something difficult in a simple manner. I felt like if I could win business that way, well, somebody outdoes me in that fashion, is better at that thing, well, hat tip to them. But I didn't want to go play golf, and I didn't want to go and just wine and dine people and spend $1,000 on dinner to win business. There's something about that never sat right with me. There's a time and a place for that.
Sure.
But if that's all you have to offer, well, how many other people have bigger budgets than you and can do something better in that regard? What other skills? Storytelling is one. The artistry, like we said, of complex subject into something simple to communicate. What are some other things that you've found have served your style well and you think might transfer to any industry in a sales?
Yeah, there's a bunch that come to mind. I would say if you're in an industry, you need to figure out what value do you provide? And this goes back to you can't be all things to all people. Mm-hmm. And I think about where I am and what I do. That doesn't work for everybody. People, for a number of reasons, either they don't align with that particular mission that we have, or they don't want to use the certain strategies that we use. We have a wide range of things that we do. Sometimes they just don't believe what we believe. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Or it's really understanding who is your ideal client. And if they don't fit your ideal client, you're probably better off not working with them.
Well, so from your perspective, how do you narrow down who's ideal for you? Like, do you have a profile now that you've developed over years that makes it's easy to identify?
For the business that we have, I absolutely do. So I have a couple daughters, and they have this, they were showing me their notebook, and they have this ideal husband in mind. Right?
How old are they, by the way?
9.
Okay.
So it's like, when I get married, he's going to be like Prince Charming, right?
Yes,
he's going to be tall and handsome, and he's going to have a good job, and he's going to be kind and loving and sweet, and all these things, right? We should be doing that for our clients. We should make this list. And mine is about 8 or 9 check boxes. Do they fit these boxes? And if they do, then great. I'm gonna make sure I go after those because I know I can provide value and they're going to be aligned with what it is that we do.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say to your point, I don't want to step on you, but I do want to say something that's relevant. Allison DePauli, who's a producer down in San Antonio, she's got a boutique agency called Altique. She talked about this on my show. It's you need to be willing to tell somebody that they are your ideal client. Like, let them know, hey, you're exactly who we work well with, just so you know. Like, and that might be, hey, maybe she's telling it to everybody, or you could tell that to everybody, but that's not the case with her. But that's okay to let them know, like, you are exactly the type of client that I want, and I can do good things for. So I just want you to know that, right?
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I used that recently with a case that I recently picked up. And when I met with the owner, we had been meeting with the CFO and the HR team, and the owner got involved, and he said, how did you get involved with us? And I let him know that it was a cold outreach. We got in touch with you through this channel. And he was like, oh, okay, but here's the deal. You're our ideal client. And I walked him through my checklist. Because of these things, I knew there would be an alignment. And we ended up picking that case up.
Yeah. And they thought, and I think that just reassures them that, hey, I'm the right, partner for you, because this is who I work with. If I come in and you're a fully insured 20 life group, and all I do is work with 1,000 life above self-funded groups, well, there's obviously clearly a misalignment there. It's also, I think, okay to let somebody know if you get to the point where there's a fact finding and it's like, you're not really a fit. I don't know if I can help you. That's also okay, right? I mean, you know when to walk away. That's part of just growth as a salesperson, is figuring out when to walk away.
Yeah, you have to know what your non-starters are.
Okay.
So of that 8 or 9 things I mentioned to you, you don't have to check every one of the boxes, but there are some of them that you absolutely have to check. If you don't check, it doesn't fit. And I've learned this the hard way over my career. If you bring on the wrong client, I think this is really important. I try to teach this to the younger sales folks. If you bring on the wrong client, let's just say the client generates $10,000 of revenue. Let's use a round number, right?
Okay.
And you think to yourself, okay, I got an account that pays money, but I'm doing twice the work. So you've kind of lost out opportunity cost-wise.
Yep.
You're better off having the right client, because you don't have to do twice as much work. If you have somebody that's not aligned, they want something that we don't really do, but we're going to try to figure out how to accommodate it, it just makes it harder to scale that type of business.
Well, yeah, you're basically saying making money can cost you more money in the long run if it's the wrong client, right? You end up spending more to keep them or support them, and it's just not a good fit for either party, which is something to remember. Hey, me telling so-and-so that we probably should walk away is also good for that employer, because you can't do what you need to do for them.
Well, and it's important for really 2 reasons. And I think these are the 2 most dangerous reasons that people don't really understand.
Right.
So the first is it's a soft cost of having the wrong client. Salespeople and their support teams don't realize they're losing money, or they don't realize I only have one $10,000 account, when really, for the amount of work I put in here, I could have 2 $10,000 accounts and really serve those people properly. So
Right.
it's opportunity cost, and I've tried to explain opportunity cost a lot. Half people get it, half people don't.
Sure.
So that's one. The second one is a client that doesn't align with your mission is going to eventually be unhappy, and they're going to leave, and I think that tarnishes your brand in the long run. And I think those are 2 important things to really understand.
Especially a very unhappy client that's willing to be vocal about it. That can obviously damage your reputation. And sometimes, you discover that, hey, they're disgruntled for something that really doesn't have anything to do with you or what you did wrong. It just wasn't a good fit, or they had a bad first experience. Then you can't control that. Once that cat's out of the bag, it's difficult to kind of reel it back in. What about, I know you mentioned you're a storyteller, and we'll probably move into the phase 3, act 3 of this podcast and kind of close it up a little bit. But you got to have a favorite sales story. Every salesperson has a favorite story, whether good or bad. So why don't you let me know which one's your favorite, either direction? Do you want to do the bad one? Or do you want to do the good one?
Let's do the, well, I'll tell you one where I learned about the type of clients that you work with.
Okay.
And I'm actually, he'll hear this story because I'm connected with him on LinkedIn.
And it's always hard. Which one do I pluck out of my Rolodex of stories to tell? But yeah, I'd love to share, because I mean, those are the relatable things, the good and bad. So another salesperson's going to listen and go, "Oh, I had something happen like that too."
This goes back to my banking days.
Okay.
So there was a big company, global company, selling equipment literally all corners of the globe.
Okay.
And I wanted their business because it was really attractive from, just from a banking standpoint, just all around foreign exchange, treasury management, lending, everything. And so I called on this guy and called on this guy and called on this guy. And he finally took my call and he said, "Look, I'm too busy to meet you." And he says, I'm flying in to DFW and I'm going straight to meetings. And I said, "Okay, how are you getting to your meeting?" I'm gonna take a cab. This is before Uber. And I said, I'll tell you what, what's your flight number? I'm gonna pick you up at the airport and I'll drive you to your meeting. And he was like, you'll do that? Yeah, absolutely. I'll get 45 minutes in the car with you.
Yeah,
of
it's
course
perfect.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
So we ride in the car, I take him to his meeting, and he ends up calling me and he's like, you know what, I like you. You're not gonna get all my business, but we'll start working together.
Nice.
So I get some treasury management, some deposits, that sort of thing, which was nice for us. It gives us the opportunity to do some other things like foreign exchange and whatnot. Well, one day I get a call from him and he said, Chris, I need you to be in my office tomorrow at 2. It's like, great. He goes, I got a deal that I need you to be involved in. And I'm thinking, all right, we're going to pick up some more business. What's this about? And he said, well, it has to do with some of these international deals I've been doing recently. Come and be ready to talk about some of the international stuff.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. Well, one thing we haven't talked about is another mentor that I had that was life-changing for me as well, which we can probably talk about him in a minute if you want. But I know he has a lot of connections. He knows a lot about the international space. I take him with me. And that's one of the things about mentor-mentee relationships. If there's something that you can provide a value to that mentor.
Oh, of course.
And this was something that was going to be valuable to him. So I said, hey, I got this meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You want to come with me? He's like, sure, come. So we show up at 2. We go into the office. I won't use his name, but he'll know who he is. Mr. Smith is not ready to see you, but I'm going to put you into the boardroom. So we go into the boardroom, and we walk in, and there's laptops up and papers and water bottles. Like, people have been working in this boardroom for a while, and they're not there. And we're standing around. It's about 5 minutes, and in walks 10 guys, not very happy-looking guys. Some of them with shaved heads and what have you. They all don't even acknowledge that I'm there. They sit down at their computers, and in walks the CEO of the company, and he greets me, and he turns to the head of the table, and he says, Vladimir, this is the guy I was telling you about, the banker. He has your $20 million. And Vladimir stands up from the end of the table, looks at me, and he goes, oh, Mr. Smith, tell me you have my money. I want my money back.
Oh.
And I look at the owner, the CEO, and I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And he says, well, you see, we were shipping this equipment to them in Russia. And this is at the time the Russians shot down that airliner over Ukraine.
Okay.
And there was an embargo, sanctions, and which is relevant to today with sanctions. There were sanctions, and they had wired $20-some-odd million to my bank. And because of those sanctions, it happened at the time that the sanctions were being installed, we froze his assets.
Yeah, it's frozen, right? Okay.
We froze his money. Yeah. And this guy showed up in the U.S., and he wanted his money.
Well, yeah.
And
you're like, is this that you're sweating,
Oh, literally, my heart,
you're like, am
my
I going to
dropped.
die, Ugh. Okay.
Yeah, it was a moment where I thought I was there to sell and make a deal.
Yeah.
And at this moment, I'm thinking, how do I explain to this Russian executive and he's an intimidating looking guy, why I can't give him his money back? And we sat down, and luckily I had my mentor with me. And he said, you know what? There's something we can figure out. Let me step out and make a couple phone calls. And he, a big global consultant, and he's the power of knowing people.
Yeah.
And he walked back, and 20 minutes later, all right, I think we've got this figured out. We can get it. And then it was kind of cool. We sat down for the next half hour and talked to the Russians about their homeland. It was kind of neat. It actually ended up being okay. And we ended up picking up a bunch of that business.
What a powerful sink or swim moment. And you had the instinct, obviously, to bring your mentor with you, and obviously not knowing that was going to happen, but thank goodness you did. Otherwise, what would you have done by yourself in that situation to get in and get out of it, ultimately, right? With your physical well-being intact. I presume they're intimidating. They weren't physically threatening you, but it's no. I'm sure the feeling was tense in there as well. But thank goodness, you had your mentor with you, and that's funny, man. That's what a sticky situation that it worked out, right? But that sounds like something obviously that stuck with you and will for the rest of your life.
We're on a mission to partner with the most innovative companies in America to fix health benefits, one plan at a time. NavMD has created a blueprint that delivers world-class benefits to 155 million Americans. Better benefits starts with data intelligence. Our platform is empowering the next generation of advisors to zero in on opportunities to optimize the plan, build the right team, implement proven strategies and solutions. Join us on our journey to revolutionize health benefits. Let NavMD put you a step ahead.
The thing that it taught me, and this is true, and anybody that's been in the sales profession long enough, you never know what to expect. You think you're walking in to close a deal, and it's not what you expected.
Yep.
I have walked in, actually, a very large company. They called me to come in. I'd already pitched them, and I thought I was going to pick up an account, a very large account. And I came in, the owner sat down, and he said, and I even asked the CFO, he wouldn't have me come all this way if I wasn't getting the account, right? And they said, no, we would never have you come this way. But literally, he walked in the room, and he said, I appreciate you coming here. I wanted to meet with you face-to-face to explain to you why I'm not going to hire you.
Did he offer to pay for your flight back at least, or compensate you for your time?
He stroked a very big check.
Okay.
And I very much admired this man because he honored my time and he honored my work.
Oh,
I put together
that's
a
cool.
complete strategy. And he said to me, again, I'm just not remembering this, but he said to me, I don't ever want to steal anybody's work because I have had work stolen from me. And I know that you put a lot of time and energy into crafting this, and there's a number of reasons why I can't use you, but I need your work. And if I don't pay you for it, because I had mentioned to him, well, maybe next year I'll get your account. I don't want to feel, because I was a little bit earlier on in my benefits career. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I thought it would set me up to get his account next year. And he says, no, I won't feel right if I don't pay you for this.
Wow.
And he stroked a big check for it.
Wow. I've literally never heard of that in the benefits world, but that's a lot of integrity to have somebody fly out, tell them you're not going to give them your business, and then also pay them for their time, so kudos to him. That's really cool, man. And do you know if he ever implemented any of those strategies that you...
He did.
He did, yeah.
He told me, he said that he had talked to his advisor, and he had a well-known organization that was advising him, but he didn't share what we did, but he was asking him if they could do those certain things, and the guy didn't know how to do it. So he said, I need your work to give to him so that he can implement it for me.
That's awesome, man. That's a really cool story.
It's kind of bittersweet because I know my work is going to a competitor, but at the end of the day, he could have given it to him
anyways, yeah.
Whether or not he paid me.
Well, kudos to him. That's really, really cool, man. Well, so in the interest of keeping us on track of time, Chris, I wanted to get into a little bit more stuff, but I want to make sure that we keep this a cohesive kind of through line in a singular podcast. Although we'll have you back, man. I'm going to have you back, and we'll go in the other studio. Let's talk about passing kind of the torch a little bit. Like, what wisdom, what advice would you give to either a young person that's in sales that's struggling, or somebody maybe that's looking to get in this field but is kind of worried about it or what to expect? Kind of pass along some of the things that you've learned down to the next generation.
So the first thing let's start with before somebody gets into this industry.
Okay.
It's just the profession of sales. I love the benefits industry. There's a lot of reasons everybody listening to this knows why. I think it's important for people to know what they're getting into. It's a very up and down industry or profession, I would say, sales. And you have to be able to deal with rejection. You have to be able to deal with loss. And you have to be able to pick yourself back up, get on the saddle, and ride again.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like I love working with athletes, particularly in sales, because they have faced adversity. They've had to dedicate themselves to a sport. They've had to train when they didn't feel well. They've had to go and perform, maybe at a time they didn't want to, but it's game time. You got to be ready to do it.
Yep.
And so I think those are things that people are really interested in the money. And money is a horrible motivator. It's a horrible motivator because you have to have a reason why you're doing it. And if you think about athletes, the reason why they train when they're not comfortable is because their why of being able to perform, their team is depending on them. They know there's going to be a point when they have to put out.
Yep.
That's what gets them going.
And it's not just the money. They're obviously at the top levels, they're paid beyond any of our imagination how much money they get paid. But most of those guys would play for 100 times less the money than they get if they just had the chance to play professional sports, right? Or just to keep playing. I was there where I was thinking about playing semi-pro soccer where you'd get a couple $100 a month, right? Something silly where maybe you roomed with a couple other guys and you had to work soccer camps just to actually be able to make enough money to feed yourself. But I would have probably done it if you know, hadn't just decided to ultimately walk away. That's where you can separate the money from the love of the sport. And even the guys at the top levels love that sport so much, and it's not the money that's keeping them playing.
Yeah, you've got to have a reason why you're getting into this industry and know that it's not easy. So those are for the people that are looking at getting into this profession. But once you're in the profession, what's the tip I would give people? Just knowing, because I struggled very early on in my sales career on the banking side, the deal-making side. And I think it was for a number of reasons. One, it was a lack of vision of where I was going.
Okay.
And I think it was maybe a lack of training or formal training, maybe mentorship, I think. And somebody that's already in the business that maybe is struggling, they need to look out 5 years from now and figure out who they want to be, where do they want to be, and then work backwards from there. One of my mentors, when she hired me, said, begin with the end in mind. She always said that.
Love that.
Begin with the end in mind, and then work yourself backwards. But the biggest hack, I don't like to use the word hack, but it really is, where my life changed, my success in business changed, was when I had a mentor. And you need more than one. And I had one within my industry, banking, and I still text her to this day, and I thank her. I probably texted her a month ago and said, you know what, thank you for everything that you poured into me. You've really helped me. And I still keep in contact with my outside the industry mentor. But those are people that will shave 10 years off of your career. They'll make you more successful. There's a lot of things that they can teach you that are going to take you forever, if ever, to learn. And mentorship is a big word in business today. Everybody needs a mentor, right? And we try to pair them up with somebody that's successful inside their company or what have you. And I think real mentorship is two things. One, it's organic.
Yeah, it's voluntary. Yeah.
It's voluntary.
Yeah.
You cannot say, I'm going to mentor this person, because the mentor or the mentee may not be fully checked in.
Yep.
Organic relationships, they're checked in. They're there because they want to be there. And then the second thing is you want to make sure that mentor is who you want to be.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the gentleman that I still work with today. He's a personal friend of mine now. We've developed a friendship. He's not much older than me. He's
a little bit older.
He's more mature.
Okay.
He'll hear this.
Yeah.
And I don't want him to feel like I'm saying he's old, but he's older than I am.
Fair enough.
Somebody that has experiences that I don't and has had career success that I haven't. I mean, this man has run multiple well-known companies, and he's done a lot of things that I've never done. He has insights that I'll probably never get. And through a chance, we had mutual connections, and there was a circumstance where I had the opportunity to meet him, and I went up to him, and that's the big thing is taking that step. Your mentor will never come to you and say, Spencer, can I mentor you?
Yeah.
You have to have the gall to go up to them and say, I'd like to get to know you. You can't ask. It's almost like dating somebody. You can't go up and ask them to marry you as soon as you meet them. They're going to think you're creepy.
Sure.
Right? But you can ask them, can I buy you a cup of coffee and chat, which is what I did. Hey, I know we have some mutual connections. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing. Can I buy you a cup of coffee and we spend half an hour talking? And you get a half an hour with this person whose time is very valuable, and you get an opportunity to make an impression on them. And that person, he's not thinking this, but you need to communicate to them what you want from them and what you can provide to them. And it's not necessarily a quid pro quo, because a lot of these people, and this gentleman... And
he doesn't need anything from you, right, ultimately, right?
No.
Yeah.
And this is what I find about him, because he's got a big heart. What I find about a lot of these really successful people, they want to invest in somebody else. You know why? Because somebody invested in them.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
They want to pay it forward.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they don't get approached. So when I approached this gentleman and we had coffee, I enjoyed him. Hopefully he enjoyed me. And we just continued doing that, meeting over coffee or lunch. And he just started, I didn't ask him to be my mentor. He just started mentoring me.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
And I would like to think there were things that I provided him that he might not have otherwise gotten. And I sure as heck, he changed my life.
Yeah.
Not just my professional life, he changed my personal life.
That's
And,
amazing.
he has said some things to me that were very hard to hear. I mean, he's called me out more than once and said, "You did this." I mean, we left a meeting one time, and he, on the car ride back, gave me some very candid feedback. I was like, why would you say that to me? I didn't say that, but I was like, you know what? He's trying to, you think about a sword.
Yeah.
And it's just a block of steel, and they heat it up, and then they forge it with
Yeah.
a hammer. That's what he was doing to me.
Yeah.
He was pounding the hammer to shape what I needed to be.
Well, I say every great coach, man, you're a great coach, right? There's a player's coach, right? And there's guys that, you play for a coach and you love them, but you better damn well be assured that coach will tell you when you mess up, right? And you need to hear it as a player. You need to hear it as a mentee. You need to know when you mess up, because what good is a mentor if they only pat you on the back or they only encourage you? They don't tell you how to actually get better. And a lot of times getting better is what do you remove from your characteristics or your personality or your process that are holding you back. It's not what do you add on top.
Yeah. So when you kind of put the whole thing together,
Yeah,
know why you're getting into sales and know what to expect is really important.
yeah,
Get a mentor, a real mentor. You need one in the industry and one out. I would just say you need at least two.
okay,
You need training. And there are companies out there that invest heavily in training. And use another kind of analogy. I love Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee has a saying, anybody that follows Bruce Lee or martial arts, take what's useful and discard the rest. He was a student of multiple martial arts. He created his own martial art. He's amazing. And he took the footwork from fencing, and he used some Wing Chun in there, and he used jiu-jitsu, and he took a lot of different things to create his own art. And that's what sales really is. Figure out what works for you and keep it.
yeah, and discard the rest.
And discard the rest.
Yeah.
And so that's important. And then I think coaching on top of training. So there's these elements: mentorship, training, and coaching. Bringing somebody that doesn't even work in your industry, perhaps, to help you with certain skills.
That's
that
all.
translate.
I was gonna usually I go closing thoughts. Give me some advice, but I'll let you land the plane for me just wherever you want to sort of wrap things up. But I mean that nugget of just that information, that advice. I mean I want to make that a standalone clip for sure because that's awesome information. But how would you want to close out the show? We've probably talked about an hour or so about sales, but what is the final nugget that you want to leave the audience with?
Then this one's going to be more specific to the folks in the benefits industry, if that's okay.
Love it. Yeah, please.
I genuinely believe we're getting ready to enter a renaissance in benefits, particularly because there's this convergence of a lot of things happening with transparency of data. There's new vendors that are disrupting, coming into the marketplace. And I think there's going to be this renaissance that happens. And the benefits advisor is, I think, one of the most important jobs in our economy today. Because companies follow their benefits of their broker. And I can't tell you how many times I've met with somebody and I've shared with them an idea and they say, well, we already have a broker and our broker's awesome and they basically do everything the broker tells them to do. That's great. They've developed a good relationship. But when I think about how healthcare works and how health insurance works, and you know this, it takes a lot of money out of our society. It's money, it's draining value from companies, and it's draining value from individual citizens. People spend so much for health insurance, and then they pay a lot of money out of pocket when they go access healthcare.
Yep.
And so that's money that doesn't go to retirements, it doesn't go to college educations or vacations or sporting things for their kids. It's basically stealing lifestyle and choice. But there are other ways to do this that companies need to know about because it literally can solve the healthcare and health insurance crisis that our country faces. And that's going to come from the professionals, the sales professionals in the benefits advising space. And so because of that, I think the sales professionals in our industry really have an opportunity, when trained properly, when able to communicate and execute, to change our economy in the United States.
Well, man, you got me fired up. I really want to have you back because, I feel like that's the start of another podcast right there. But think about how our culture and society is shaped by the stories we see. So, TV shows, movies, books we read. You mentioned the Bible earlier. How does that story shape an entire culture, shape an entire society? So for me, who wins this in this, this renaissance that you're talking about? It's the people that are telling the best stories in the marketplace. And my hope is the best story is also the thing that is best for that employer and the employees that fall under that umbrella. So go out there and learn how to tell a story well, but make sure the substance underneath it is what that, in what the industry needs. And man, you got me fired up, man. I want to keep going. But for the interest of everybody else that are listening, and obviously we wanted to make it a cohesive sales discussion today. Chris, brilliant job, man. Really appreciate you coming on. And let's just earmark, somewhere in December or January to have you back, and we'll talk benefits a little bit more.
I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, man. Bye. True Captive believes in healthcare that is personal and insurance that isn't complicated. Check them out at truecaptive.com.